All right, my friend. I think where I want to start in terms of our conversation, talking all things content marketing, is you and I have been obviously kind of talking back and forth on LinkedIn and all sorts of
Yeah.
things related to comments and posts. And I even had this long post about my experience of actually buying Avoma too,
Yeah.
which I think makes this whole thing interesting. Maybe we can kind of talk about that as it relates to content. But at any rate, I think the place I just want to jump right in and start is one thing that I literally just talked to another head of growth manager over at Navitic, a kind of product tour company, is she had mentioned in 2023 that she was not going to be focused on a couple of very core content pillars, things like webinars and email newsletters and other things like that. And I think that's interesting. She's making a conscious choice to focus on some other things just based on her team size and resources. And I think like right now, we'd all agree, everyone's saying this constantly, although I think this is probably always true,
Yeah.
is that focus is really, really important. And that's really the theme of 2023, given that, some folks have lost some people on their team and budgets have been cut and all sorts of things have happened. But looking at your website, you guys have lots of different things you've been doing over the years. Looks like, so you have a podcast, you've got a book, guides, blog, and all sorts of great content. And I think what I wanted to kind of nail down is, if you understand the story a little bit, I wanted to kind of get into like how that all started, at least from your time when you were at Avoma, and how you guys manage all those things. Because I think a lot of like different SaaS brands, at least we talk to, it's so hard to do all those things and you want to
Yeah.
have all the different formats, but
Yeah.
you can't do it all, right? And you need to
Yeah.
kind of decide, hey, what things we want to start with. But walk me through like that journey a little bit.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great place to start. So I
Yeah.
joined Avoma in April 2021, and for
Mm-hmm.
almost a year from there, I was a one-person marketing team, and I was doing pretty much everything from content to a bit of product marketing. I was even doing product demos a little bit. I was doing a little bit
Love
of
it.
partnerships. A typical startup marketer, as you can expect, doing everything on
Yeah.
the table. Because one of the first things that my CEO asked me in the interview is that, are you willing to do anything that it takes as long as it's ethical? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I want, because a startup is a different breed. And you're right,
Yeah.
you have to take specific bets over a period of time and you cannot do everything. So one of the primary things when I joined the company, I said that, hey, my core specialty is going to be content. There are other areas that I can expand into, but, primarily I want to focus all things on content. And from there, let's expand and let's go on to build the team. So now, how did we focus was that the number one thing back then was that very early, a lot of companies, in my opinion, one of the fundamental mistakes is that you shouldn't be jumping into the attribution and measurement very quickly until you understand what is working for you, and where you stand. Because back then, a lot of people did not know our existence. When you look at conversation intelligence as a domain, so at that time, before Chorus got acquired by ZoomInfo, there were primarily Gong, then there was Chorus, and then there were other products. And when I first looked at Avoma, one of the fundamental things that I realized is that Avoma is unlike any other conversation revenue intelligence product because they are not necessarily this. I'm talking about looking at Avoma as an outsider before joining the company. So I was like,
Right.
these guys aren't talking the same story as conversation intelligence for sales. They are not talking only the sales coaching use case. They're talking about a life cycle. They're saying that, hey, there are a set of things before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting, and look at it holistically. And I love that point of view because every other company that was coming into this space was probably doing what Gong was doing. And it was more like, we offer 80% of what they do at 20% of that cost. And that
Right.
story is not going to sell for a long time. So one of the fundamental things that we decided is that, hey, we need to have a very clear point of view on who we are and what is the direction that we are taking and what are the set of things that we are going to do through that path. And if you look at the journey, some of the blogs or some of the content that we put out were pretty unconventional. And typically, you would not put this as, hey, is this top funnel? Is this mid funnel? That was not the idea. One of the fundamental principles that I had back then was, hey, when you look at these funnel system, you make an assumption that, hey, somebody's going to go through this 5 or 6 or even multiple touch points before they're going to buy a product. And who has the time? Realistically, I have never read 10 blogs or heard so many videos before I bought. When I'm looking for something, All I'm looking for is this really authentic information? Does it really solve my problem? And how can I trust them? Can I talk to some of their customers? Or today, the ecosystem that we live in, for example, I can reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and say that, hey, I want to try this product, but looks like you guys are using it. Tell me, how is this helping to solve this particular problem? And they might jump on a call with me and showcase how they're using this product to solve that. So I'm getting a demo right there, even before going to that particular company. So when we figured out this overall understanding in this ecosystem, we said, let's be realistic, let's be authentic. And one of the very interesting pieces of content I first created when I joined in was I wrote a blog called Chorus versus Gong, or Gong versus Chorus. This was a huge blog post, about 3,000 words. And the interesting thing is, my CEO said, don't write, he was very specific. He said, don't write Gong versus Chorus versus Avoma. No, let's not do that. And here's why. Back then, a lot of people did not know us. So we did not want to come across as right off the topic. If it should not look like we are one-upping ourselves against the two people that are already known to the industry. You look at avoma.com as a domain, and then you look at this topic, even before reading it, however genuine the content is, you're going to always make an assumption based on the heading. So we said, let's go and look at the data. The data said two clear things. It said everybody who came into our ecosystem were already evaluating Gong, or everybody who were going to buy Gong also evaluated Chorus, and vice versa. So when somebody reached out to us, they had already seen one of the two products, and then they were getting to us. So we wanted to make sure that we did not want to be the third option, but we wanted to be the first option. So first things first, we wanted people to know that we exist. More importantly, we have a very unique and different take on how to solve that problem. And then we wanted to establish that. So when we did that blog post, we were genuinely talking about where Gong excels, where Chorus excels. And we were absolutely praising, because of course, they are market leaders and they have done a great job. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot if we said anything else. So that's there. And then we also said, okay, while these are doing a great job in all these areas, you need to look at these 5 factors when you're going about comparing tools. And then these are the areas where this is how they perform in each of these areas. And beyond this, there are also certain gaps that you need to think about. For example, if you want to use a tool that scales beyond one function, you need not buy 5 different tools. We spoke about our all-in-one approach of you can do everything from scheduling to getting revenue insights in one platform. So now looking back, that idea is even more helpful, because we are still experiencing the economic downturn, so to speak. And you don't want to go through a SaaS fatigue of using 5 different tools or paying so many tools, because you hardly use about 30% of that. We wanted to leverage those fundamental concepts. And sometimes we thought about, hey, even if it's not directly selling our tool or helping to sell, let's establish. Sometimes, we used to say that, hey, if you cover the headline and randomly read any of the 4 lines in a particular post, does it authentically say this is Avoma's point of view? Do people recognize that this is how Avoma speaks, or people at Avoma speak? Let's have those fundamentals. And from then, the expression can manifest in any form. It can be a blog, it can be a video, it can be a podcast. All of those things can come out. But fundamentally figure out who we are and what we want to communicate and put it out. And I was very happy that Aditya said, don't worry about measurements for a while. Let's do great marketing. That's the focus, and things will fall in place over a period of time. So that's where it all started.
So I want to come back to something you said earlier that I think we all talk about. You said a lot there, and I took a bunch of notes. So in terms of like POC and perspective, I think this is a really big thing that we all talk about in content marketing in general. With anything that we write, whether it's a post, a blog, a guide, it doesn't really matter. Whatever the content piece is, like, what's your take and what's your opinion? Yeah. But I think what's interesting to me is I think, one thing that I think a lot of companies struggle with is determining what that take is. And ultimately that should drive up into a strategic narrative or some type of story that you're trying to tell the market. And I think there's a lot of times a lack of that, especially in these Series A to Series C companies, which is odd because I'm assuming that's in their investor deck somewhere. But at any rate, it's more about exposing that core message to the ICP as it is today. But what are some challenges you see specifically with establishing some type of point of view perspective in content? Because I think that's what really makes content good. It's not just listing out a list of facts, right? Necessarily. It's saying, hey, here's how to run a LinkedIn ad account. Here's what I would do, right? Not like taking support docs from LinkedIn saying this feature does that and this does that. What's your take on that in terms of point of view and perspective within content?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it actually starts from your understanding of where you are in the market. For example, when I first came in, one of the first fundamental market landscapes that we drew for ourselves is to understand that, okay, there are, say, for example, specific note-taking tools that give you templates that you can take notes from manually. And then, of course, there are also a lot of recording tools that are available, which also records these conversations and gives you transcriptions. And then there are revenue intelligence tools like Gong. And then there are also other set of tools which offer some sort of meeting assistant, which put in the content and they automatically update to your CRM. But what we realized is once you understand where you stand, you realize that, okay, what we offer is we have all of these things. And the point of view is that once you understand that you don't need several of these tools and you know where you are, you start to have an understanding of the market space. And especially this comes from founders. It comes from understanding of your product. Because fundamentally, in a startup, when a founder develops a product, he or she starts with in many ways, I would think that a product in itself is a point of view, right? So you have a specific approach how you want to solve a problem. And as content marketers, as product marketers, as performance marketers, as demand gen marketers, across the spectrum, one of the things I very strongly believe in is that unless you don't understand your market space, unless you don't know your product like the back of your hand, everything else is going to be manufactured out of the blue, and it's not going to come across as authentic. You wake up in the middle of the night and you ask about a particular feature, and you talk about a specific problem. You must be able to understand, hey, how do I use XYZ features to solve your problem? Or when you mention a problem, I need to understand that, hey, what parts of this product can be pulled together to solve this aspect. So unless you know those things, the point of view won't come, or how to solve won't come. And then what happens is everything that you put out beyond that would be more like you're converting a feature into a problem statement and then again offering the product as a solution. That doesn't help anybody. You need to actually start with what is somebody trying to solve for. So sometimes, it also comes from listening to these calls and understanding what kind of issues do these people mention on a regular basis. And then sometimes we derive our, content ideas or topics. I'll give you one example. So there was this conversation wherein one of the prospects was talking to our AE, and he was mentioning that, hey, I see something called filler words in your product. And the interesting thing about that is, yes, it shows me how many filler words do I use, but does it help me, does it tell me that because of usage of filler words, am I going to win a deal or lose a deal? What's going to happen beyond? What's the impact? And I was like, wow, that's a great question. And why don't we have content about that? And we went back and we did a little bit of digging of, about like say 500K to 1 million calls there. And we realized that there are three key things that came out. One was that just because you use filler words, you're not going to lose a deal. But that said, anybody using about 70% filler words for every 100 words that they speak, they are going to come across as, confused or not very clear in their thought process, or maybe a little nervous, not sure, something like that. And then when you're 100% perfect in your delivery, it also comes across as way too rehearsed, a bit too plastic. And we realized that, scripted, right? And we realized that there is this 1 to 2% of filler words that makes it look authentic, because that's how people speak. And when you're conscious about not totally eliminating your use of filler words, but moderating it to an extent that works, then it has a high positive impact on the number of deal closures, because it builds authenticity in the first conversation. Of course, there are several factors, but this made me go back and dig this, and this became a blog post. And now marrying it to the thought process of what is the search volume for filler words? There were, I think, roughly about 6K per month. So that also added up. So when you merge in a real problem that somebody has to also the search volume and the several aspects of marketing or content marketing that you try to pull in to make sure that there are enough number of people who are also trying to consume this. And then the rest is also content distribution. So it starts from making sure that your content is really, really authentic and comes from the understanding of what your customers are facing. Many times we write for the audience that we imagine, but when you know that, hey, these are the kind of things that your people are talking day in and day out, you start writing for your customers, then it's magical. You don't write for somebody who is an imaginary prospect, but start writing for customers, and that's a huge change.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. I think it's a huge part and something that, again, needs to transition all pieces of content. But I think you said it well. So it's that, the problem itself, it's that initial problem statement of what your product solves and how it's going about solving that problem that initially kind of gets you off. And then all that content needs to kind of pull back in. There needs to be some type of dotted line. And I think that's a good transition point, because the way that we think about it from a paid perspective when working with SaaS companies is we usually have product marketing, thought leadership, social proof content, and then your just kind of general top of funnel content. And those are kind of really the 4 buckets that we have. And you can obviously categorize this with topics and all sorts of stuff on your website differently. But in terms of organizing content that way, that's the way we think about it. Yeah. And so then I think what that really leads into is then, all right, well, then how do we ensure how much of our content really needs to have a direct dotted line back to our product versus content that's generally helpful to our ICP, but maybe doesn't really have necessarily anything to do with, say, Avoma in this case. And I'm curious of your take on this, because I get a lot of these conversations with people, and everyone's all nervous to talk about their product or have any association with it. We just want to say, no, we just want to be helpful and create valuable content, and that's all we want to do, right? We don't want to talk about our product. We don't want to pitch it. We don't want to mention it at all. And I don't really think that's right. I mean, you can still find ways to weave those things in. You just to make sure that ultimately the question or the problem or the outcome that buyer has, that you're doing a good job in, say, 70 to 80% of that blog answering that question. And then maybe there's a tie back at the end to that kind of says, hey, and one of the ways that we think about it at Avoma is XYZ. So how do you think about that with content? Do you kind of separate it? I mean, how do you guys bucket and like create topic clusters? So I know you have sales and a couple of the different topics that I saw on your website in terms of the way you organize it. And then the last question is, how do you determine how much a tie or a dotted line there should be back to the product versus like what you would call maybe more thought leadership or stuff that's just generally valuable to the ICP?
I love this question, because this is something that we talk inside the company almost on a regular basis. This is a constant topic, because one of the fundamental values that we carry at Avoma is that don't write to promote your product. That doesn't mean that we are not showing screenshots of the product as part of our content. Okay, sure. What I mean is, you don't want to continuously say that, hey, sign up for this product in every possible sentence. And then at the end of the day, you don't want to spam people. Okay, so the fundamental focus for us is always saying that, is this content genuinely useful for somebody? What is the intent of this content? Somebody is searching for something and landing on this page, and they're trying to solve a particular. We've all experienced this. For example, you would search for something, and then you would see the same top 5 results, like say certain sites that come up among the top 5 all the time. And it exactly matches your search phrase. But once you go inside that, the content doesn't really answer your question. You're like, it's going round and round, probably 4,000 words, 5,000 words, but doesn't really talk about what I want to solve for. So what we do is we have certain values that we write. We have about 7 or 8 checkpoints internally. We say that, does this content take all of these? To give you some examples, we ask something like, who is this content for? Why are they here? And are we offering a solution for that? Second, a very important question that we ask ourselves is, what gives us the authority to write on this topic? Now, if it's not a topic that is our core, for example, if it's not anything to do with note taking or scheduling or conversation intelligence or revenue intelligence, what gives us the authority? For example, we wrote a blog post on how to build your referral program. Okay, that has got nothing to do with what we do, but what gives us authority is that we have built our own referral program, and we went through evaluating a number of tools, and we landed on one of these tools. And this is why we landed, and this is how we built our referral program, and this is what we do. So why we did that is because there were a lot of similar companies who were in seed or series A, who were going through the same situation, and we wanted to be genuinely helpful. There is no scope for talking about Avoma. At best, I can talk about what's our referral program there, but we are
Right.
trying to be genuinely helpful to somebody. But on the contrary, if I'm talking about a different problem, then after talking about what gives us the authority, we say that have we really answered their question in the sense that are we genuinely solving their problem, or is it
Yeah.
self-serving for us? Are we trying to heavily promote
Yeah.
that? And
Exactly.
then there is this balance. Going back to the earlier point where I said we don't assume that somebody is going to come back again and again to check all pieces of content.
Hmm.
So in that journey, what we mean by that is when somebody's coming to solve a particular problem, it's not just top of the funnel. You just don't talk about what is a CRM or that kind of stuff, because
Hmm.
somebody already knows what it is, or probably there are thousands of pieces of content out there, but what is it unique that we can give that is not existing, and how can we really solve the problem? And once they come in, can we experientially show them that, hey, these are the things that we have done to go about solving it? And in that story, can we showcase our product, right? These are the things that in the product, this is where we did this, and this is how we go about solving it. To give you an example, somebody asked me in a call, how can I identify signals of potential churn? And then I thought, okay, I can use Avoma. I can go back and look at, say, save some of the searches that mention specific terms. Like, say, for example, somebody mentions that we now have an in-house team to build X, Y, and Z, or there is a change in
Yeah.
leadership, so on and so forth. And then I showcase that once you do this, then you can set up a workflow internally to, as part of your QBR, you can ask this, or when you
Right.
do your monthly review, you can do
Right.
this.
Yep.
So you're still telling the story, but showcasing certain aspects as how you can leverage this to do that. So that's
Yeah.
how we bring in the product. The intent is not to entirely sell the product, but to solve the problem. And in that use case, if we can genuinely make sense, then that's how we do it.
Yeah, and I think the what you said at the beginning is important, is making sure you write who is this content for from the
Yeah.
beginning, and especially if you've got multiple different people in the buying committee and you've got a more complex sales cycle, that you've got those different people identified, because some of those people are going to have different questions, different wants, different outcomes, different problems that they're trying to address, etc. And the way that my take on it is like the way that we think about it internally, and we don't do content marketing related stuff, but one of the things we do is try to map product problems, wants, and questions to
Yeah.
product marketing messages, and to be very clear about the association of those specific things with, say, either a persona or the overall ICP, depending on how complex it is. But it's literally just taking an Excel spreadsheet out, and I like to keep things easy, but it's literally
Yeah.
saying, okay, cool, we've got on one side the different personas and the different people that we're trying to create content for. Here are the questions that they have. Here are the wants that wants, outcomes, or desires that they're trying to shoot for.
Yeah.
Here are some problems that they're struggling with right now. And then my biggest question is what you just said. All right, is there a dotted line back to our product if we answer this question, right? So, for example, you mentioned churn.
Yeah.
Maybe Avoma has nothing to do with churn whatsoever, and it
Yeah.
does not help people with that. If that was the case, at least for me, if I'm an early stage SaaS startup, I decide maybe to postpone that a little bit and focus on note taking and call recording and
Exactly.
call insights and summarization and all things like that I can tie some type of dotted line back to in the beginning. And then as I start to get some traction with that content, people are starting to get some value from it, et cetera, then I can maybe explore some other types of content pieces that are maybe associations with our product, but not really a direct tie. So like to me, like it literally comes down to that grid. And then you've got your content layered up for, say, the next 3, 6 months, 9 months.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. And, somewhere you also alluded initially to the sales playbook. I think that's also another good example to
Yeah.
talk about how do you map it to the right set of people. The interesting way that concept came up, that playbook concept came up, was that it came up of my frustration with the backend CMS, most website CMSs. What happens is when you write a blog post, you often see that, hey, these are the 3 related blog posts that you might want to check. And 90% of all these CMSs, what they do, whether it's WordPress or Webflow, whatever you're using, what they do is they map it back to those categories, and these might not necessarily be related topics, but it's very automated and you don't have control over it. So one of the things that we decided to do was that, hey, we wanted to make sure that we take people through a particular journey. Like you said, the flow that you mentioned, saying that, hey, these are the people who have these problems, and then these are the things that they're looking for. So we categorize sales into 4 areas. We are talking to sales leaders, sales managers, AEs, and SDRs. And then we
Perfect.
realized, what are the problems for each of these? So all
Exactly.
these became a list of topics to talk about, and then we built out content for each of these things, and then said, okay, if you are an sales leader, then you might want to look at how to do sales reviews, or what to do when a big account churns, or a few things like that, or how to hire, whatever it is. And then so when you're in a particular topic, on the side you could see this flow of topics that a leader would be interested. But if you're not a leader, and if you ended up there, you also look at, as a sales manager, what are the things that is most relevant to me? Or if I'm an SDR, what are the prospecting techniques that I should be aware of to do better here? Or, how could I do X, Y, and Z? So when you take them through that flow, then you realize that, okay, I've also gotten this feedback that, hey, it makes a lot of sense, because these questions were exactly the burning questions that I've had. And then another key aspect is that when you understand this journey, I've spoken to a lot of our blog readers one-to-one, and one of the fascinating realizations, for example, that I've had is that when you look at a SaaS blog, generally you might have also seen that they also have a lot of social media share buttons. And I asked them, like, when was the last time you saw somebody's content and felt, I should share this on social media? I'm like,
Me,
nobody, not
never. I don't think I've ever done that. Yeah.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
Nobody. And then similarly, I said, okay, how do you consume content? What do you do after reading it? And invariably, when I spoke to about 25, 30 people, each of them gave me a very similar flow. They said, first, I quickly skim through the key topics that you have covered as a heading. And if I find it interesting and if it makes sense to me, I go read it deeper and maybe possibly take notes here and there. And then if I find it really useful, or something that is implementable, and I wanted to share it with somebody in my team, I would drop it on Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever internal tool that they're using.
Exactly. That's
Right?
exactly what I do. Yeah. I mean, I'll literally go through the blog. I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. I think my team might actually get some value from this. Grab the link,
Exactly.
throw it in Slack, and like that's it. But I'm not ever like taking it and saying, okay, I'm going to share this with the whole entire social media world and say, hey, check out this blog. It's the most amazing thing ever. That type of thing.
Exactly.
I might,
Exactly.
maybe take some ideas from it though, and that might prompt me to think about a specific perspective or opinion I have on a topic, and then I might write a post or create a video or do a podcast or something like that about it. Now that I might do, but in terms
Yeah.
of just like to your point, clicking, the share to LinkedIn button, like
It never happens.
never happens.
Exactly, exactly. So what we did through that was that, okay, once I realized that the skimming style, that became our flow for building a TOC template on top of our blog to say
Yep.
that, hey, these are the topics. You see it at one go. And then you click on each of these. Sometimes what happens is, you don't want to read the entire blog. There is one specific part of the blog that you're actually interested in. You just want to read that piece and see if they offer a solution for you. You can click on it and just go to that section, read it, and get out. Right.
Yep.
And then if you like it, what we did was we also added a small CTA, a floating CTA, which said, did you find it useful? Then copy the URL. So you can share wherever you want. So once you understand and talk their language, it's far more simpler, far more resonating, rather than saying that, hey, share it with everyone. We are for everyone. You don't want to
Well,
do that.
I think this obviously just comes back to like the simple thing is like, all right, if you were the person reading that blog, what would you want to do? And I think you said it
Exactly.
there, right? And it's getting out of that like company centric mindset of like, hey, what ideally I'd like to happen is I'd like someone to share this post, to go viral. They share it on their LinkedIn, someone shares it on Twitter, then so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
then we get all this great distribution from it, and that'd be awesome. And,
Yeah.
there may be some people that take experts. I'm sure some people do that. But, the vast majority, to your point, are not doing that. That's not the
Yeah.
typical way that people consume and then share information. But I think that's actually a good transition. I want to make sure we get a couple things and also talk some AI stuff, too, before
Sure.
we end, because that's incredibly hot right now. But distribution and repurposing. Talk about it all the time. I think that there's so much focus always on creating more and more and more content,
Yeah.
but sometimes, and especially for you guys have lots of content. So there's lots of different things you guys have created. So I think one thing that is always neglected is, all right, what's the plan and how we're going to distribute this, right? Are we going to distribute some of it via paid? Are we going to ensure that we have an SEO agency helping us rank for these in different keywords on the blog itself? Are we going to share it via social? Are we going to clip it up into maybe a video or something, or do a webinar on it, link that back to the blog post, share clips of that out by paid and organic on personal profiles and things like that? Like, what's the plan and how we're going to get this in front of people? So I'm curious, like, how do you guys think about distribution or purposing? Because I'd love to share this with some other people, because I think it's just like one of the biggest missed opportunities. It's like we don't necessarily need another blog right yet, or maybe you do, but most people don't. Most people have a decent amount of content to work with.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think this is one area that I'm also trying to constantly improve. I wouldn't say that we are the best yet, but we stick back to fundamentals. I think one of our virtues that we stick by is understanding the jobs to be done for every piece of content. So we try to understand who is this for, and where do these people hang out, and then those are the areas that becomes our points of distribution. And then you try to understand, okay, what format of content do these people consume there? So, once we go about, like say, for example, this particular podcast, and we are having an amazing conversation. Now, there are parts of this conversation that might be useful for certain people. Maybe, you can cut this into snippets and put it in specific areas that people might find useful. It could be a TikTok video. It could be, on YouTube, or it could be YouTube Shorts. It could be LinkedIn, wherever. And then from here, this becomes a proper blog post, which again, we are very, very conscious that we don't want to just put a transcription of this conversation and make this a blog post. You want to make it readable. You want it to offer the best possible experience in every single thing. And, one of the interesting things that I've learned from sometime last year, I did a podcast with Safegarden. And very interestingly, what he said was the best marketing is the one that is done to you. What you don't even realize as you're being marketed to. So when you realize that, and you want to be genuinely helpful. So the mantra that we generally live by in this aspect is that you don't want to necessarily outspend the competition, but you probably are well equipped to out-educate the competition in different formats. So when you take that educative mindset, you find different avenues to push your content, and you're trying to build a cycle. Sometimes we are very conscious that, hey, from here, certain aspects we don't want to necessarily build a funnel. For example, let's say I'm doing a webinar. I'm not necessarily looking at, okay, once somebody who's registered here, do I put them on a marketing automation cycle? Because I want to build trust. As a startup, you have limited access to a set of people, and you don't want to burn bridges. You want to make sure that you're building trust and distributing it, and be as open as possible, as reachable as possible. And if you genuinely offer respect, they will also come back. So our distribution is always focused on that mindset.
This, you hit on a point. I mean, I actually just posted about this on LinkedIn yesterday, but I think it's making sure that you consider the intent levels behind the different forms that people are filling out. If it's a gated ebook, if it's a webinar, if it's an event, if it's a demo request, if it's a incentivized demo from a sponsored message ad on LinkedIn, et cetera. Each of these have varying levels of intent, and the follow-up motion should be different as well. And I think, to your point, I've never been a big fan of the like, hey, let's take someone's email from a webinar or from a piece of, an ebook or something. We're going to waterfall drip them down this crazy thing. If they click here, they click there, they're going to go down this huge, skeleton of a system, right? And then out comes money at the end of the day. And I think that, there's probably some people that work their way down a path like that, and maybe they ultimately buy, but it's certainly a small percentage. And I've always just been a big fan, for me, at least the way that I think about consuming and the experience I would want is like, if I sign up for a really great webinar, or if I don't know, any piece of content, like, just send me some more things every now and then that are like that. And, at the end of those, if you're doing a good job content marketing, you have that dotted line back to your product, or you say, hey, when you're ready, or if you ever need help with XYZ, you might have that at the bottom. That's the reminder for me. And it's not hard for me. I mean, you don't need to push me through this waterfall. Like, your website, I'm sure, has like 13 different CTAs saying speak with sales, or book a demo, or whatever the CTA is, or try it out, So it's not like it's that difficult. So to your point, I think it's about earning trust, like you said, and not trying to push people through these huge mechanisms of forcing people through something. So.
Yeah. Interestingly, a couple of weeks back, our CEO had come down to India for a visit, and, I met him for a one-on-one, and I asked him, if you had to give me one goal for content marketing for 2023, what would that be? And his answer was very simple and crystal clear. I loved the answer. He said, just make sure that people in the SaaS universe say that Avoma has the best content marketing team. That is all.
Wait, so you're saying he didn't use the words ROI? He didn't want an ROI from each different blog post and try to attach, hey, it seems like this blog ends up resulting in revenue more than this one. We should do more of this blog. None of that.
All of those things are important, and they have their place, but that's not the core, right? So as long as you're building that experience and making sure if somebody comes and says that, hey, I've been a huge follower of your blog and I've learned so much from you guys, and then the moment they are in the market for buying something, they're going to think of us. That is probably the best long-term bet. Of course, we also need to feed the sales team, and all those things also have to happen. I cannot talk philosophy day in, day out. But that said, if we operate by this virtue and also keep feeding the team and maintain that balance, it makes a lot more sense rather than being hyper focused on what am I going to deliver right now and being way too transactional. That never is going to build trust.
Exactly. All right, let's wrap on one last big thing here. So obviously everyone's been going crazy about ChatGPT since November of last year. You've got other tools like Jasper and Copy.ai, Jenny.ai, and anything with .ai. It seems like there's all of these content marketing and things that help you create content either faster with it and using those things. There's been conversations all about plagiarism and everything and being careful about that and getting caught for creating more robotic content, the fact that quality is going to decrease. But I've talked to actually a number of different SaaS companies. Interestingly, they're very focused on trying to figure out how they can leverage these tools completely with no humans at all, which is interesting. And I'm not really a big believer in that. I think it's more AI working with humans to create content faster and better. But I'd love to get your take on this, you being the content marketing pro, even more so than myself. What's your take on this? And are you guys using any of these tools internally too that maybe help you create better template structures and write content better?
So at this point, we don't create content using AI. And the entire content marketing is run between me and another person called Manish. Just two of us creating all the content so far. But I do definitely have a lot of respect and value for ChatGPT 3 and all of these tools. The thing is that, yes, it's phenomenal what it's doing. And I think, as you rightly alluded to at the beginning, it's a combination. Think of it like, you are buying an autonomous car. You're starting from absolute self-driving to an combination of you driving and AI taking control of certain things, and then going into the spectrum of being completely automated. I think we might get there at some point. But today, as what is available, I strongly believe that maybe you can leverage ChatGPT in certain areas to make the first draft for you. And then probably you can have your own spin. See, at the end of the day, I'll go back to point of views, right? So AI cannot have point of views. It's not generalized AI. It's still very narrow AI in specific areas. It can give you, like, say, if I go and write that, hey, give me a post on content marketing for LinkedIn, and it shows me, it throws up 7 or 5 pointers, and when I read those 5 points, I'm like, I wouldn't post this. I wouldn't be proud to put my name on this. So it goes back to that. If you feel that, if you're genuinely adding value and if it's unique to you, that uniqueness is going to come from your own understanding of your domain and your own understanding of the customers. And you cannot expect AI to do that.
No, I'm totally in agreement with you on that. So I'm glad you said all that. Yeah, I think it's more there to assist, again, like all these tools or any type of AI tool or piece of software for that matter. It's not there, at least for right now. Maybe in the future, there's some world where it completely replaces, and we've got point of view and all sorts of things, and you can just give it a variable and say, hey, this is kind of the point of view I'm trying to take with this piece. Can you make sure that that point of view is expressed in the content? I'm sure at some point that'll probably have to come. But I think for right now, at least the near term, it seems like, we've done some cool things with, Jasper and some other things like that to write ad copy and headlines and things like that. And sometimes it's crap, to be honest. And we throw it out and we say, this is not going to work. This just doesn't align at all with the landing page and website we're trying to send it to. But in other cases, like, hey, it gives us some ideas. We're like, hey, we didn't think about it that way. So I think that the whole problem with like writer's block and not sure exactly what to do and all sorts of things like that, I think, to your point, gets out the first draft a little bit. You get some ideas, but then ultimately you have to come back over it. And then I've had some other situations when playing around with ChatGPT where whatever spits out in terms of the outcome, it actually almost takes me more time to edit what came out of one of these systems and to put it with my point of view and then get it into, say, LinkedIn. So in some senses, I don't know, I kind of go back and forth on it as my stance is I think sometimes it's kind of helpful to get a little bit across the line. Other times I feel like it's taking me longer if I just were to write it myself, because I know kind of where I want to go. I know the point of view and I know the points I want to make, et cetera, versus trying to get something to kind of, push in some data into it. So
no, absolutely.
totally
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I won't take any more time. This is awesome, man. We'll have to do this again. I wanted to get into so many more things in terms of measurement, attribution, a whole bunch of stuff you mentioned the front end of this call. So we'll have to, I think, come back or talk offline. But
absolutely.
But how do people get in touch with you and or Avoma? What are the best ways to do that?
So the easiest way to connect with me is, just type Yaag on LinkedIn, YAAG. And since my name and spelling is a bit unique, it's easier to find. That's you can also connect with me on my email, which is Yaag, YAAG @avoma.com. It's AVOMA. And if you're wondering what Avoma means, it is abbreviation for a very organized meeting assistant. So that's where the name comes from.
I like that. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, my friend. Enjoyed having you, and we'll chat here again, and I'm sure on LinkedIn. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure talking to you today.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.